this is another position group that, generally speaking, under Matt Campbell has been a very consistent group, highlighted by a couple major NFL players, David Montgomery and Breece Hall, who were back to back. You had Dave Montgomery, and then the beginning of 2019, Breece Hall leaves after the 2018 season. The beginning of the 2019 season, Breece Hall comes in, doesn't start right away, but he gets carries in the first few games, and then by the time he gets to West Virginia, he's the full blown starter and never relinquishes that role until he leaves after his junior season, after the 2020 season. So, you've had good consistent talent there for a while, and then a couple years were a little dry. There was not a, he was it was kind of a running back by committee with no real alpha dog there or anything. And especially in then 2023, the running game was pretty poor. They had a number of guys that were very mediocre at best. Then last year in 2023, you had 2 years ago now. In 2023, you had Abu Sama break out as kind of a true freshman, and started getting a lot of he started getting starts towards the end of the season. Had a couple of really explosive games against Kansas State, and BYU, and played really, really well. But then he gets at the Liberty Bowl in the running game, has 0 yards. I would say rushed for 0 yards against Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. But Rocco broke the single game passing record. So funny how that works. But then you get to 2024, and we're like, well, okay, Abu Sama is the guy, but Carson Hansen is also there. You have some interesting names. You have those two guys for sure. And then beyond that, you've got true freshman Dylan Lee, who we don't know exactly what we're going to do with, but he's an interesting player. He's got good high school tape. You get the season, you start with Abu Sama, and actually, you've also got a transfer in of Jalen Jackson, a guy from Eastern Michigan, short guy, 5'8", 5'7", 5'7", 5'8" on a tall day. Kind of a really explosive athlete that's really elusive. So you've got 4 guys coming into that room that you are going to get. They're going to distribute these carries somehow with those 4 guys. Abu Sam was the first guy getting carries, and he's okay. You can still tell he's a great athlete, but he's still just not there as a true, like an expert in his craft as far as reading blocking schemes and reading running lanes, and doing a good job finding space, and then or getting himself into space and knowing when to bounce out, when to stay inside. He's still just not quite getting. He's not good at finding the hole, or pacing himself there too, to make sure he's hitting the hole at the right time. Not always the best at that. But Carson Hansen's also coming in. He's a little bit different running back. He's not as necessarily as elusive as Abu Sama, and he's not necessarily the home run hitter that Abu Sama is, but he's a great downhill back that you can get. If you can get him between the tackles and get him a lane to run, he'll get you 10 yards, and then you go from there. He can run somebody over. He can't get the long run, but I said he's not quite as explosive as Abu Sama is. And you get to the Baylor game, and Jalen Jackson all of a sudden has a breakout game. He has like 130 yards or something like that. And you can see his elusiveness. So then the next couple games, he gets like starter snaps, and he's kind of bad. Just didn't work out. He wasn't successful in getting upfield. If you were asking Jalen Jackson to make a guy or two miss in the open field, he's got it. But if you're asking him to really read blocking schemes and read gap assignments and follow blockers through holes, he just wasn't very good. It wasn't patient enough. And he wasn't good at exploding through running lanes in the line. However, as the season goes on, you see Carson Hansen creep up again. And Carson Hansen is getting a lot more carries. They're finding more ways to get him downhill. And then you start really seeing him start to flourish towards the end of the season. And you can see that he does have the athleticism there. He came out of a flex bone offense in Minnesota, which apparently that offense is kind of the scourge of a lot of these mid divisions in Minnesota, because tons of them run that. But he came out of a flex bone offense, which is designed to get running backs downhill. And when you could get Carson Hansen running downhill through an A gap or a B gap, whatever it is, with a lead blocker, like an H back, like a Steve O'Klotz or something like that, he is really, really effective. He will just plow forward and get you 8-10 yards. He can do that, and he can do that on a consistent basis. And we also saw some explosiveness from him too, where you get him a little bit of room to run, and he can run past a guy and get to the end zone. We saw that against UCF. So it was nice to see him. So, as the season went on, Carson Hansen definitely established himself as more of the consistent starter and was appeared to be this guy that's going to get, he's going to get more carries than the rest of them. I say in the past with when you have guys like Brees Hall and David Montgomery, you can have an alpha dog. You can have a guy that just sit there. He can be your workhorse, your bell cow that gets 25 carries a game. Carson Hansen's still probably not a 25 carries a game kind of guy, but he can be a 15 to 20 guy pretty easily. He's got the body for it. He's physical enough to do it. His running style lends him to doing that. So going into this coming season, I would expect he'll be the starter at the position unless someone really, has a big time spring. Maybe Abu Sama has a big breakout spring and finally the light really comes on for him and he's not just a explosive athlete. And you lose Jalen Jackson to graduation. The next guy, then you have Dylan Lee coming off a red shirt, which is interesting. He really didn't play. He got a few carries, last season, but they were kind of garbage time carries at the goal line, things like that. So he really wasn't asked to do much. He didn't need to do much, and that's okay. But his high school tape looks good. And he seems like it'd be an interesting option there. The incoming guy, which I'm very excited for. His name, I believe his name is pronounced River, but it's Ryver, but I believe it's River Peppers is his name. That's how you pronounce that. So I'm going to pull him up just so you can kind of check it out. This is a guy I'm really, really interested in because he seems like he follows a similar mold to what we see a lot of out of Matt Campbell's running backs here. So you'll see him obviously here. He'll get circled because we're on huddle, but you see some of this, a lot of this in Carson Hansen's tape where he gets uphill and then just makes a guy miss and then pulls down. But he's got, you see some long speed there, running past guys. This is he is from Independence, Missouri, so just outside Kansas City, which is that's an area that Iowa State has really hammered the Kansas City area. But you see right there, it's a nice tough run inside, and then has the speed to pull away. I don't know if this is the most elite competition, but he's still looking like a guy, good vision there, and then just has the wherewithal to just get upfield, get past guys, and then just finish out the run. I mean, right there, he's pulling away from a guy at the end. This is, it's a guy I would say has typically not played true freshman at running back very often, unless they are true like breakout stars, and there's a clear vacancy there. There is not a clear vacancy at running back this year. Carson Hansen feels like a very good option one. And Dylan Lee or Abu Sama, whatever is going on there, you'll have a couple guys there at the top at least. But gosh, if you look at this kid's tape, I mean, he is explosive and the kid's a home run threat. I mean, and I understand that these are huddle highlights. I mean, they're intended to be, these are intended to be the kid's best plays. But I mean, all of these plays are like 70-yard runs. I mean, they're stacking the box. They've got 8 guys in the box right now, or 7 guys in the box trying to stop this kid. And they're run blitzing him on the edge. He's just doing a nice job. And then just bang, he's gone. There's really no hope. The safety took a pretty good angle there, as good angle as he could, and just straight about ran him. Kid's a nice athlete, and he's a home run threat. I think this is a kid that's has a chance to be really, really good for Iowa State. We'll see. I haven't seen much in his highlights so far as as it relates to catching the ball, but modern running backs in general are typically pretty decent at catching the ball because most offenses anymore require offenses to be able to catch, or most offenses now require running backs to be some sort of pass catching option. And I don't think Iowa State would have taken a flyer on a guy that couldn't catch a pass. It's hard not to look at this. It's hard not to watch this and be excited for what this kid can bring. I don't know if he plays next year. Like I said, you got a couple options at top with Carson Hansen and Dylan Lee and Abu Sama. I've mentioned before on this stream that I think there's an outside shot that Abu Sama flips over to corner to fill that. Because he was actually coming out of high school. A lot of schools, and Iowa State included, wanted to put him at corner. but they just said, well, we're just going to try him out at running back and see what happens. And obviously he was, explosive at running back. And they're like, well, damn, we can get this kid going. And his freshman year had lots of explosive plays. Last year, he even had a good chunk of explosive plays, but um, just was never quite the consistent bell Cali you kind of were hoping him to be Byron now. And that's not to say that he can't be. It's not to say that he can't, this offseason really turn the corner and turn into the really high end elite back that we think he thought slash think he can be. Um, but obviously it's also got a vacancy at the second corner spot. And maybe you look at Abu Sama there. There's precedent there for turning offensive players into corners with Darian Porter. It's an interesting conversation to have, especially when you've got, you feel good about Dylan Lee, and then you got this kid coming in. I it's hard not to watch this and be excited. Right there, he's fighting through a couple different tackles on that play. And running back's always a tough one. And he's lined up on the slot on this one, so I guess we're gonna see some pass catching chops here. Run right past the guy, make a nice catch in traffic there. I mean, I'm sure it's one where he can work on his route running a little bit. Like there, on that route, he just kind of ran through the seam. He didn't really have to do a whole lot, but good adjustment there on that catch. I mean, this kid's really talented. I'm very excited for River Peppers. I think he's going to be a really interesting player um, to look at going forward. So the future of that running back spot, I think, um, is bright. They've got some good guys in the room right now. Another guy that got a couple carries, he got meaningful carries last year. Um, Not only in the regular season, but got some even in the Pop-Tart Bowl was Aiden Flora, who was a walk-on, I believe, from Adele and from a high school called ADM. And he got carries and had, I think, a couple scores this season. I don't I don't know what the plan is with him. I mean, I would, with the roster sizes changing and the scholarships changing, no matter what happens in the spring, you're just going to have to lose guys. I mean, there's just not enough roster spots to keep everybody on the roster. Especially, honestly, it sucks because the guys that are going to suffer the most are the walk-ons. Walk-on programs across the country are going to be trimmed down quite a bit. But they're gonna have to make room for guys, or they're gonna have to get guys off the roster because they just can't keep that many on there. So I don't know if that means that Aiden Flora is. I don't know if that means that Aiden Flora is going to be a victim of that, or if that means he can, carve out a spot because he did get some decent snaps last year, even as a redshirt or even as a walk on running back. When you've got four other running backs in that room that are on scholarship, I'm not sure what that looks like for him. He's still on the roster. He has not transferred yet, so I'm sure at least he and or the program both believe there's a future there for him to do something. Um, so that'll be an interesting situation to monitor there. Um, no matter what, you've got a good stable of bodies there. I think that are really exciting going into next season.